CNN had interviewed the leader of the rebel group, I believe. I think it is the leader of HTS, yeah. About his plans for, this offensive going into Syria. And this was before all this stuff happened. I think this video came up 2 days ago or so. So this is what the leader of the HTS was saying his goal was in going into Syria.
Syrian rebel forces have now taken over Hama. That is the second major city they've captured since launching a surprise offensive last week. Syria's military says its troops had to withdraw from Hama after rebels entered several parts of the city in another blow to President Bashar al-Assad. Now, rebel fighters also freed hundreds of prisoners, saying they were all wrongfully detained. Some residents in Hama are now celebrating the rebel takeover.
Thank God, we've been waiting for this day for a long time, and we're all coming out on the street. This is the happiest day for us.
Wow.
We were afraid to go out at night. We've been waiting for this.
Feelings that can't be described. It's been 50 years we've been suffering injustice and crime and oppression. This is a historic moment.
Okay. I'm going to say this. This is really cool because sometimes you'll see these regime changes with rebel forces and then they don't actually represent the people, or the people don't actually like the group. And I will say, yes, it's still early, but this is actually really cool to see the citizens happy that apparently they feel like they've been freed and they've been liberated. That's nice. That's a little heartwarming.
Priceless moment.
Priceless moment. Now, rebels are vowing to push further south to Homs. That is the next major city on the road to the capital, Damascus. CNN's Jemana Karatse sat down for an exclusive interview with the main rebel leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. He says the Assad regime is, in his words, dead, and explains how his forces have been able to sweep through Syria.
Taking Hama, after taking Aleppo, how significant is this for you right now?
From a military perspective, what comes after Hama will not be the same as what came before. However, I prefer not to be overly optimistic during the battle. I like to remain cautious and vigilant to avoid complacency and ensure we don't suffer losses while believing we are safe.
Smart.
What comes after this? What's after Hama?
The course of the battle, as for the secrets of the battle, let's leave them to the unfolding events. You will witness them in reality, which is better than discussing them now.
In a matter of days, you have taken major cities. What's changed? How are you able to do this now?
In recent years, there has been a unification of internal opinions and the establishment of institutional structures within the liberated areas of Syria.
Okay, that's good. So it sounds like he has a plan of what to do moving forward. I was a little bit curious as to whether or not there will be a situation of, we've taken over Syria, now what are we gonna do? I don't know. Which has caused issues in other places where rebels have taken over nations. So it's good to hear that he has a plan on what he's actually going to do, so that there's not a lasting feeling or sense of chaos in Syria.
Institutionalization included the restructuring within military factions. They entered unified training camps and developed a sense of discipline. This discipline allowed them, with God's guidance, to engage in a battle in an organized manner. The progress and execution of plans have been swift, with clear communication and adherence to commands. They stop where they should stop and withdraw where they should withdraw. The revolution has transitioned from chaos and randomness to a state of order, both in civil and institutional matters and in military operations alike.
Some believe this is happening because the allies of the Assad regime, the Russians, Hezbollah, Iran, that they're weakened, they're preoccupied with other wars. And this is why we are seeing this happen right now. And the Syrian regime itself weakened. Is this what is happening right now? Is this why you chose to launch this offensive right now?
As you know, we are still in the midst of the battle, and discussing such details at this time is not wise.
But you faced more of a resistance in Hama than you did in Aleppo. What do you think happened? Why did the regime withdraw like it did?
The seeds of the regime's defeat have always been within it.
Ooh.
It has been effectively dead.
Ooh. And I was wondering about this too. It's like, because I didn't say anything earlier in the stream, but I was like, you know, if you got some random rebel group marching up on your territory and you lose in a week when you're an authoritarian regime that has been oppressing the people, like you have to have a lot of power to be able to oppress civilians, right? Even if you're taking away their guns, you know, you need a strong arm, right? You need like a militant government, a militant police state, all that stuff. And so for a regime that's authoritarian like that to just fall so quickly, there was a part of me that's like, I wonder if the people on the inside will cooperate with the people on the outside to take over the nation. And so for him to say, what is it, the seeds of the resistance have always been from within is firstly beautifully poetic. I like that use of the English language, even though it's translated. But also, yeah, I would imagine that this is how something like this happened. I don't know enough about the region to hazard a guess like that, but it's very interesting to see that that's what caused this to unfold in this way.
What do you think happened? Why did the regime withdraw like it did?
The seeds of the regime's defeat have always been within it. It has been effectively dead since that time. However, the Iranians attempted to revive the regime, buying it time, and later the Russians also tried to prop it up. But the truth remains, this regime is dead.
Wow.
In the last year, it seemed like Bashar al-Assad survived the war. He was welcomed back into the Arab fold and on the world stage.
The Arab countries' evaluation of the situation was mistaken. Some Arab countries try to separate the regime from Iran's project. This is impossible. Even if the regime wanted this, it can't implement it. It's a subservient relationship. Iran can disengage from the regime, but the regime can't. To describe the regime as victorious is deeply unjust to the many children, people, women subjected to rape in prisons, displaced individuals scattered across the world, those drowning in the seas, and those living in tents on the borders of other countries. What kind of victory are we talking about?
In the past, you have talked about strict Islamic rule. Is that still the plan?
Interesting.
People who fear Islamic governance either have seen incorrect implementations of it or do not understand it properly. We are talking about...
I feel like that's a yes. Because he didn't say no, right? Usually it's like, oh, do you plan on oppressing the people and making the women wear hijabs? It's like, well, you know what? You know, there are other Islamic nations that have not implemented their policies correctly. Like, you're dancing around the question here. You're not answering it directly.
Incorrect implementations of it or do not understand it properly. We are talking about something that aligns with the traditions and nature of the region. The most important thing is to build institutions. We are not talking about rule by individuals or personal whims. It's about institutional governance. Syria deserves a governing system that is institutional, not one where a single ruler makes arbitrary decisions.
I don't understand. He's being so vague, right? He says the word institution, but I do not think that it means what he thinks it means. Because he just says like institutional over and over again. Does he mean what's it called? Decentralized? Does he mean like a distributed system of power? Because you can have an institution that is ruled by one man. Most nations, I would say, most governments, they're all institutions. You can't have a government without an institution of some sort, but you can have a nation without authoritarianism or without the rule of a single person over all of the citizens of a nation. So maybe he means democracy or something when he says institutions, but institution alone is not a guarantee of democracy.
It's about institutional governance. Syria deserves a governing system that is institutional, not one where a single ruler makes arbitrary decisions.
Many Syrians are happy and will be happy to see the end of the Assad regime, but they're also worried about what HTS rule would mean, including minorities.
No one has the right to erase another group. These sects have coexisted in this region for hundreds of years, and no one has the right to eliminate them. There must be a legal framework that protects and ensures the rights of all, not a system that serves only one sect, as Assad's regime has done.
Dude, this dude is seeming like the coolest Islamic terrorist ever. Like, I don't know. Now, of course, he could be lying through his teeth. He could be lying through his teeth for all that we know. But, you know, it sounds like, you know, I think in an earlier CNN segment, they were talking about how they were hoping to prevent further oppression of minorities in Syria. It actually seems like if HTS is being 100% truthful in what they're saying in this interview, that Syria could be improved by Bashar al-Assad being replaced. Which, hey, if what happens results in a net positive, that net positive is something that I will most certainly be happy about. So that is very cool. I just hope he's telling the truth here.
All. Not a system that serves only one sect, as Assad's regime has done.
You know, listening to you speaking, you've gone through quite the transformation. Once an Al-Qaeda leader, your group has had affiliations with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS, and now you are projecting this image of a moderate leader and a moderate group. What
Good
is
segue.
HTS right now?
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is one of the factions in the region, just like all the others. Now we're talking about a larger project. We're talking about building Syria. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is merely one detail of this dialogue, and it may dissolve at any time. It's not an end in itself, but a means to perform a task confronting this regime. Once that task is complete, it will transition to a state of governance, institutions, and so on. I believe that everyone in life goes through phases and experiences, and these experiences naturally increase a person's awareness. A person in their 20s will have a different personality than someone in their 30s or 40s, and certainly someone in their 50s.
So are those days behind you?
Sometimes it's essential to adjust to reality, and because someone who rigidly clings to certain ideas and principles without flexibility cannot effectively lead societies or navigate complex conflicts like the one happening in Syria.
I think it's a little bit interesting, the terminology that he's using. She basically asked, like, well, didn't y'all used to be friends with Al Qaeda and ISIS? What happened to that? And then bro's answer is basically, I grew up, you know, with age comes wisdom. Am I right? Which is interestingly vague. I also find it generally unconvincing. Because, you know, I think Amanpour in another CNN segment had pointed out that around the time that they had softened their language was around the time that they started prepping for this offensive. So again, I would caution against having too much hope. I am anti-hopium. If you've seen my recent streams, you know I'm anti-hopium. But do not put your trust in princes and mortal men who cannot save. You know, for all we know, this dude could be lying, right? It's true. This guy could be lying, and he could be just put it in another form of authoritarianism in the place of Bashar al-Assad.
People listening to this are going to wonder why they should believe you. You are still a specially designated global terrorist by the United States with a $10 million bounty on your head. Your group is a prescribed terrorist organization by the United States, by the UN, by the EU, and others.
I say to people, don't judge by words, but by actions. I believe the reality speaks for itself. These classifications are primarily political and at the same time wrong. I define a terrorist as someone who intentionally kills civilians, harms innocents, or displaces people. If we're being honest, many of the wars waged by major powers in Arab, Muslim, and even non-Muslim countries have involved the deliberate killing of thousands, the destruction of homes, and the displacement of millions.
Now, actually, I'm kind of curious, though, because that's actually not a bad barometer, but I wonder if HTS is actually guilty of this. Like, I'm just going to look this up. HTS kills or attacks civilians. Now, of course, a quick Google or start page search isn't going to pull up a comprehensive list of everything that's been done. Yeah, I'm not seeing any headlines initially that the HTS has murdered civilians, but at the same time, of course, this is a developing story, so most of the articles are going to be from the past week, and I don't think in this most recent offensive that HTS has murdered civilians. So, it's one thing to say stuff like this, is another thing to abide by it. So I think that'd be one thing to look out for as well.
And the regime itself is guilty of such actions.
But the U.S. and others would say is that you were parts.
Bro, I'm digging the cinematography on this.
Is guilty of such actions.
Bro, look at this sweeping
the US
shot.
And others would say is that you were parts of groups that did exactly that.
Personally, I have not done these things. The situation.
What a cheeky response. Like, how many people has like Putin personally killed? Right? Probably like, I don't know, none. I would imagine. But if you tell someone to do something, like if you order people to go kill an individual, you're responsible for that, right? So this idea that he could skate around the question by saying, well, I haven't killed anyone. Who, me? Little old me? Like, come on, fam. Come on. Like, that's not what we're talking about, bro.
Situation must.
And others would say is that you were parts of groups that did exactly that.
Actually, what I should do is I should look up why the U.S. has declared the HTS a terrorist organization, because I'm sure within that there will be listed examples of what the HTS did, probably against civilians, that would provide an explanation.
Personally, I have not done these things. The situation must be understood in its historical context. There was a massive war in Iraq that deeply stirred people's emotions, prompting many to go there. The circumstances of that war led people to various places, and my path led me to one of those locations. Given my level of awareness and my young age at the time, my actions evolved to where I am today. I didn't go to Iraq with those intentions. I went to defend the Iraqi people. When I returned to Syria, I didn't want to bring what happened in Iraq into Syria. That's why there were disagreements between us and ISIS.
People would be wondering why you've agreed to speak with us.
So it sounds like what he's saying there is like, I wasn't a political wonk when I came in. I didn't really know what I wanted, which is why I joined ISIS initially and why I left, which is a little bit more convincing than the answer that he gave earlier. But I wish that he was more specific with what it is that ISIS has done. ISIS has done a lot, So if you agreed with ISIS enough to break away from them, then I feel like you should have some examples of things that you disagreed with ISIS on. Where you could be like, you know what, I disagreed with ISIS's position on this. I disagree with ISIS's position on this. We butted heads on these ways of whether or not we should proceed forward in this direction or in that direction. And that's why we ultimately went away. But this guy's giving just a vague answer of like, well, I figured out what I wanted to do when I grew up, and our aspirations weren't aligned, so we just broke up. Like, okay, we know there's a lot more to the story than that.
People would be wondering why you've agreed to speak with us.
What is happening in Syria is significant for the entire world. This event has positive repercussions globally because under the regime's rule, Syria became a source of concern and trouble for everyone. Stabilizing Syria will bring many people back. Today, in the liberated areas, about 1/3 of the population lives in camps, approximately 1.5 million people. I believe we can soon reach a point where there are no camps. With the rehabilitation of the liberated areas, people will return to their homes. Many refugees in Turkey will likely return, as will a significant number of refugees in Lebanon and Jordan. Even refugees in Europe may return to rebuild their country.
And that's great.
Fascinating interview there. I want to thank Joanna Karatse and her crew for that exclusive.
And that's great because, we do see internationally, especially in Europe, I've noticed, a lot of people very, very upset with migrants who are coming into their countries, especially with the refugee status. and sort of like not assimilating, or in some cases causing violence. And a lot of those people, those nations, are going to be relieved because they now have a place that they can send those refugees back to, because some people have wondered and been concerned about whether or not, okay, these refugees are here. Are they going to be here forever? But now, with at least this war seemingly ending, we have at least one instance of one of those nations that's caused displacement being able to rehabilitate its land and its state and country enough for the citizens to return from whence they had gone. So, you know, I am not a big fan of violence. I don't support running around killing people, but at the same time, I think that orderly war is different than just straight up murdering people. And also, at the end of the day, I hope that you know, Syria improves, and that what follows this violent takeover of the state of Syria leads to the true liberation of the Syrian people. Like, I hope that there's not more oppression, more authoritarianism. I hope that this does not become a heavy-handed Islamic nationalistic state like many of the nations in the region are, but a place where there is true democracy in the region, that the people will truly be free, that they won't just feel free like they do now, but they actually will be free and be truly liberated. At least that's my hope. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, though.